Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here tonight to tell you my story of courage. We're kind of on a theme here because it's another story about cancer. Let me say something about who feels called to tell their story in the frame of courage. My journey here started on July 25th when I was waiting in the consultation room of the Cancer Care Center to hear the results of a biopsy of a possible recurrence of a cancer I'd been treated for a year and a half earlier. As the clock slipped by 45, then 50 minutes past my appointment time, I saw a pair of shoes in the gap between the door to the room and the floor move across, then stop. The sound of the chart being pulled from the rack beside the door, and the door opened. The doctor entered. Let's call him Dr. Y. Cut right to the chase. This cancer will end your life, he said. Well, my anxiety had been rising pretty steadily over the time that I was waiting for him, and with these words, it shot right through the roof. I recall this odd feeling as if I were watching myself sitting in the chair in that room, and I was squirming around and mumbling and complaining because it had been so hard to get them to test for the recurrence that he was announcing now. "Why are you getting emotional?" said Dr. Y. "You just told me I'm dying." "Everybody dies," said Dr. Y. "What about a second opinion?" I asked. "You don't need a second opinion," Dr. Y said. "If there were better medicines, we'd be using them." "What about a drug trial?" "You couldn't do a drug trial," said Dr. Y. "That requires patients to do additional things, do additional tests. You don't have what it takes to do that." I left that encounter with Dr. Y in a daze. I remember still feeling oddly removed from myself and eerily, wearily calm as I called people to tell them what had happened while driving home. Since that day, I have been scared shitless, afraid of dying, afraid to hope, afraid not to hope. It has taken every bit of courage I can screw up every day just to live. I'm a person who always wanted to be courageous. When I was a kid, I thought that meant standing up for what was right, standing up to the bully at school, to the teacher who picked favorites, to my parents who just didn't understand. Is that courage? After the 9/11 attacks, I had this fantasy. I was going to go to Afghanistan, where Osama bin Laden was hiding up in the hills with his men, and put on a burqa. And as a woman, I'd be, virtually invisible to these men. And under the guise of serving tea, I would get near to him, then pull out my machine gun and blow him away. Kind of a grandiose idea of courage. But since my encounter with Dr. Y, I have learned about the quiet courage of living with terminal illness, of confronting a healthcare institution that holds my life in its hands, and about searching for that balance between hope and despair. It's a different kind of courage. Dr. Y's shaming of me was so successful that it took weeks for me to realize what had happened, and that I had somehow to find a way to live, to get out of the frantic state that I was in. And I was lucky about that. Starting with a massage therapist whom I'd worked with for years, I gradually built a network of complementary care providers and practices that sustains me now. There's massage, there's acupuncture, there's psychotherapy, there's meditation and prayer and journal writing and a support group. all kinds of things that really help me feel as though I matter, and at the least, I can control how I live my life. I'm a person who doesn't have family in the state or a partner, but I turn to family and friends for their help, and I am so deeply grateful and moved by the loving care and kindness and generosity they have shown me, and some of you are here tonight. Thank you. I've heard people say, you know, when there's a tragedy, you find out who your friends are. But it hasn't been that way for me. For me, it's been kind of this wonderful thing about seeing just who shows up, sometimes very unexpectedly, to help. And again, I'm deeply grateful. Living with terminal cancer is like living with a bomb in your chest. They have told me it's there and it will go off and kill me, and soon, but I don't know when, and I don't know how, and I don't know if any of the things I do to make my life livable change that in any way, or how it changes that. That takes courage to live with that. Some of the things I do to support myself in my wellness also take courage. That support group I belong to, it involves meeting with people where we talk about our battles and trials with cancer, and you come to know one another, and care about each other. But then, of course, people get sick again, and they'll die, as I will one day get sick again and die. As much as I love it, it takes courage to walk into that room every week. I have a new doctor at the Cancer Care Center. She doesn't paint any rosy or prognosis, but she treats me like a human being. And that's important. I filed a complaint against Dr. Y and the physician's assistant who was monitoring me after my first round of treatment, but did not order a simple common blood test for a marker for my cancer. And when I had symptoms last summer and told her suggested we should take a scan, she absolutely refused. It was my primary care physician who ordered the scan that revealed the extensive tumor last summer. In response to my complaint, the patient relations office of the hospital said that, well, they had followed guidelines, and at any rate, it didn't matter what they had done to monitor me because I was dying anyway. It didn't matter how you monitored me. If it didn't matter, why the fuck did you have me come in for appointments every 3 months if it didn't matter? Treatment like that made me feel as if not only didn't I have a chance to live, but I didn't deserve a chance to live. I knew I had to find a way to get out of the terror and despair where Dr. Y had left me. Living with cancer, living with terminal illness is just like living, only harder. You have to do the same tasks. I have to pay the bills. And besides, getting those tasks done, there's the question of where the money comes from when you're not working and it's a smaller stream pouring in. I have to do the laundry, but now sometimes I'm grateful that I'm able to still do the laundry. It really affects planning. I mean, should I plan a vacation for this summer? Should I put a deposit down? I mean, I had to agonize over whether to buy a pair of boots, even though the ones I had were raggy, because this might be my last winter. I bought the boots. And I did not save them for good, like I would have in other years. There's also the big tasks that I've put off for decades. Getting a will written, confronting with real seriousness what is the meaning of life and what comes after it. And deciding for once and for all if I believe there is a God, and if there is, what does she want of us? It all keeps me busy, and my mind off the diagnosis, but that terror creeps back every once in a while. 4 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, the middle of Sunday night, there it is, like a weight on my chest. Sometimes I want to get up and scream. I want to run away, but there's nowhere to run because the bomb is inside me. There are moments when even still I cannot believe this is happening to me. I'm a person who was terrified of public speaking for most of my life. Some years ago, I got involved in Toastmasters and found out that I loved it. I just really loved it. So when I felt called to do this and began to plan for it, I began to wonder, why? I mean, it's anxiety-producing. Believe me, I have enough anxiety right now, And I figure people don't really want to hear about terminal illness. I mean, I don't want to talk about it. I mean, I've just snubbed people on the street when I meet them because I didn't want to have to explain that obviously bald head underneath the chemo cap or a wig. But there are reasons for people with terminal illness to speak out because we don't have voices. We are silenced by a cultural convention, a taboo on talking about our plight because no one wants to face their own mortality. We are silenced by healthcare institutions that want to be able to offer whatever care they want to us. It doesn't matter because we're dying anyway. And we are silenced by our own fear. And then, eventually, our physical frailty. I was talking about speaking to this with one of my complementary healthcare providers who told me that in Chinese medicine, traditionally in the villages, there was a practice that when a person became ill, the whole community gathered around them. And the person who was sick would tell them their story and receive their compassion. And so, here I am, tonight, with you, telling you my story. Thank you.